July 2012. A survey team comprising a dozen hydrologists is making its way along the ancient Sichuan-Tibet road. The men are heading to the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, where they'll carry out a study of the hydrological conditions at the source of several major rivers. This is their 32nd trip to the barren, snow-covered region.
这个沟里的河是吧？对吧？这个对的挺准的，这正好把这个热巴这个图。
The Yellow River is quite leisurely as it flows across the Ma-Chu grassland. It makes a 180-degree turn, the first of the famous 9 bends on the Yellow River. This stretch of wetland is where, centuries ago, the celebrated Tibetan king Gesar fought to unite the various Tibetan tribes. Ma-Chu, in the Tibetan language, means Yellow River. In ancient times, the river, as it flowed from east to west through northern China, regularly burst its banks. Half a century ago, experts initiated a study here to determine the feasibility of channeling the abundant water of southern China to the arid north. 3 canals are being dug to connect the water-rich Yangtze with the Yellow River. One will be in the west of China, one in the central region, and the third in the east. The 3 routes will cut across high mountains, broad plains, many cities, and numerous rural communities, bringing much-needed water to northern China. In ancient times, Yu the Great worked a miracle in subduing a deluge. Today, the South to North Water Diversion Project is, in terms of its scale, unprecedented in human history. Completing it will be the work of several generations. This English-style, castle-like building is the Yangshupu Waterworks in East Shanghai. Since it went into operation on August 1st, 1883, the country's first modern waterworks has supplied clean water without interruption for the past 130 years. Today, the Yangshupu Waterworks supplies water to more than 2 million Shanghai residents. In the summer of 1919, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who was then 53 years old, was working on a huge plan for the development of China. His office was at number 7 Xiangshan Road, not far from the Yangshupu Waterworks. As part of his vision for modernizing China, he proposed building a dam on the Yangtze River to generate power, and another dam to divert water from the Yangtze for use in irrigation. But the country was being ravaged by warfare, and Sun Yat-sen's plan became just a dream. In the autumn of that same year, Mao Zedong, who was then 26 years old, drafted the Statutes of the Association for the Study of Problems, which was published in the Daily Bulletin of Peking University. This article raised more than 140 problems relating to China's economy, education, industry, and communication, to which Mao proposed a series of bold solutions. 30 years later, Mao Zedong and his comrades in arms stood above the Tiananmen Gate, where he made a solemn declaration to the world. Later, in the late autumn of 1952, 59-year-old Mao Zedong left Beijing by train for his first inspection tour after the founding of the People's Republic. His first stop was Kaifang. As someone with a deep knowledge of China's history, Mao became thoughtful as he stood on the bank of the Yellow River. Standing beside Mao was Wang Huayuan, director of the Yellow River Committee under the Ministry of Water Conservation. Wang was surprised by how little Mao spoke about taming the Yellow River. Instead, he raised a strategic idea. There's plenty of water in the south, but there is not enough in the north. If possible, we should borrow some water from the south for the north. Mao's hope was that the plan could solve the thousands of years old problem of regular flooding in the south and constant drought in the north. Two months before this meeting with Mao Zedong, Wang Huayuan had sent a survey team to the source of the Yellow River. The experts had crossed the Bayan Ha Mountains and reached the Tongtian River, the upper stream of the Yangtze. They were the first water conservation experts ever to visit this area of wilderness. Their mission was to investigate the conditions at the source of China's two greatest rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River. In his report to Mao Zedong on the research expedition, Wang Huayuan proposed diverting water from the Tongtian to the upper reaches of the Yellow River. A recording of Wang Huayuan later in life is kept in the archive of the Yellow River Committee. On one, Wang describes making his report to Mao Zedong.
主席问了这以后啊，又问通天河引水，说通天河你能引多少水，多大工程？我说了，可能啊，据现在的资料查看回来，可能引水啊引100亿。主席说这个引水100亿呀太少了，能从长江引水1000亿呀就好了。
The Yangtze River, the longest river in China, has a mean annual flow of 960 billion cubic meters. It pours nearly 900 billion cubic meters of fresh water into the sea every year. Considering the distribution of water resources in China, the most rational option for alleviating the shortage in the north of the country was to divert water from the Yangtze. Shi Zongjun was a member of the first team to survey the source of the Yellow River. After more than 60 years, he still recalls the hardships he and his colleagues suffered.
这个气温很低啊，这风一吹，这老羊皮这个它的毛不是很长啊，一吹它能都粘住了，都冻住了。这是拽住那马尾巴，拽住马尾巴，马前面走，人在后边这样。到那个时候那就比较陡了，马也走不了了，死了好几匹马呢，都累死了，累死了。
During the half-century following that first expedition, a series of feasibility studies were carried out on diverting water from the upper reaches of the Yangtze to the Yellow River. several generations of water conservation experts have conducted more than 30 expeditions into the wilderness, collecting data on the local topographical, hydrological, and meteorological conditions. Sadly, some of those experts lost their lives there. China was a poor country, and technical standards were low. In the harsh, high-altitude conditions, such a gigantic and complex project posed an enormous challenge. Yet the Chinese government never wavered in its determination to divert water from the upper reaches of the Yangtze to the upper reaches of the Yellow River. This concept would later become the foundation of the South to North Water Diversion Project. In 1953, China introduced its first national 5-year plan. It was also the year when the first large-scale construction projects under New China were launched. Also in that year, Mao Zedong once again raised the matter of diverting water from the country's south to its north. In February 1953, from on board the naval vessel Yangtze, Mao conducted an inspection tour along the Yangtze. Among those accompanying him was Lin Yishan, director of the Yangtze River Water Conservation Commission. Mao was reminded of the conversation he had had with Wang Huayun the previous year. He said to Lin, "There is plenty of water in the south, but very little in the north. Can we borrow some water from the south and send it to the north? Have you ever conducted a feasibility study?" Wei Tianzheng was Lin Yishan's secretary at the time. He remembers accompanying Mao and Lin on that inspection tour.
林先生说这件事我们没有研究过，他说你现在回去抓紧研究，如果有可能就向我报告，是吧？所以从这个时候开始，就53年开始，我们就研究这个隐含饥荒的问题。
The Danjiang is the longest tributary of the Yangtze. Since ancient times, when it was known as the Danshui, it has been an important water route to the Central Plain. If water from the Yangtze was to be diverted into the Yellow River, a dam would have to be built. Hydrologists, having conducted several expeditions along the Yangtze, concluded that the place where the Danjiang met the Hanjiang River was the most suitable site for a dam. In a poem describing Bei Daihe, Mao Zedong wrote, "A rainstorm sweeps down on this northern land. White breakers leap to the sky. The autumn wind still sighs, but the world has changed." In August 1958, a meeting of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee was held at the seaside resort of Bei Daihe. For the first time, a key decision on diverting water from south to north was adopted. The decision was to build a reservoir at Danjiangkou. The reservoir would have a water storage capacity of 29.05 billion cubic meters.
修当时的设计水位就是现在的水位，170，就是170。当时由于国家的情况的变化，就没有按照这个设计就把它修完，只修了有1多半，修到162，就是初期工程就变成2期了。
The construction of the original Danjiangkou Dam was completed in 1974 after 16 years of work. The reservoir could store over 10 billion cubic meters of water. According to the plan, a canal would be dug from the reservoir northward as far as Beijing. This would be the middle route of the south to north water diversion project. Mao Zedong's vision of a smooth lake rising among the narrow gorges was realized with the construction of the Danjiangkou Reservoir. The project's completion was also the first concrete step towards diverting water from China's south to its north. The Jiangdu Water Control Station is situated at the point where the Beijing-Hangzhou Grand Canal meets the Nantong-Yangzhou Canal. Construction of the station began in December 1961 and was completed 16 years later. This vast complex has 4 electric pumping stations and 12 sluices. It is capable of lifting 400 cubic meters of Yangtze River water every second and sending it northward. The operation marks the starting point of the eastern route of the south to north water diversion project. It was determined that the south to north water diversion project would follow 3 routes: middle, eastern, and western. However, this gigantic project involved far more than simply digging 3 water diversion channels. The work was much more complicated. Transforming the blueprint into reality would require overcoming numerous technical difficulties, some that were being faced for the first time in world history. It would also need strong backing from the whole country. The sense of historical responsibility would be a heavy weight on the shoulders of the Chinese nation. The third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, held in December 1978, adopted the policy of reform and opening to the outside world. Subsequently, in May 1980, the State Council designated Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen as special economic zones to operate on an experimental base. The 3 cities quickly began to flourish, and their positive economic impact was soon being felt elsewhere. In July 1980, Deng Xiaoping, the chief architect of China's reform and opening, traveled eastward from Chongqing to the Danjiangkou Water Control Station. He was keen to learn about progress in the south to north water diversion project. He asked the water conservation experts with him about the specific technical and safety issues associated with raising the height of the dam at Danjiangkou. Increasing the dam's height was essential if the Danjiangkou reservoir was to be capable of regulating the water supply. It would also be decisive to the operation of the middle route of the south to north water diversion project. The height of the concrete dam would have to be raised from 162 to 176.6 meters. This would increase the reservoir's storage capacity to 29.05 billion cubic meters. However, raising the dam's height involved overcoming a number of daunting technical problems. Yet the middle route of the project faced an even greater challenge: the relocation of the local inhabitants. Under the plan, 350,000 people would have to be moved to make way for the reservoir's expansion. How could they be persuaded to abandon their homes and move to somewhere unfamiliar? The issue was not only economic, it was also a complex social challenge.
再亲下去有酒。
新年快乐，茄子，哎，好。
China's GDP in the early 1980s was less than 250 billion US dollars. The per capita figure was 290 US dollars, just 20% of that of middle-income countries. China wasn't strong enough at the time to build both the middle and the eastern routes of the water diversion project. For over 10 years, the government deliberated over which should be built first. Yang Zhenhuai, a 1950 civil engineering graduate from Shanghai Jiaotong University, has devoted his entire career to water conservation. He firmly believes that the South-to-North water diversion project, like the Three Gorges Dam project at the end of the 20th century, is key to China's economic development and output growth. For many years after 1983, when he was appointed Vice Minister of Water Resources, he participated in numerous discussions on how to proceed with the South-to-North water diversion project.
我的思路是想先上东线，后上中线，因为中线的话，整个工程要全部渠道要开挖，1500公里的渠道全部是新挖的，光占地就占40万亩。另外，单江口水库要加高的话呢，要多淹35万人。东线是什么呢？东线是大运河，利用这个河道，它不占地，另外不移民。
With both routes presenting advantages and disadvantages, the experts in water conservation, engineering and environmental protection argued over which should be built first. Tianjin is known historically as the gateway to Beijing and as a key strategic city in North China. 5 tributaries of the Haihe River meet in the city, but in the mid-20th century, Tianjin began to suffer water shortages. It badly needed water, yet the municipal authorities declared on several occasions that it did not want water from the South to North water diversion project.
东线那个水呢，污染得很厉害，因为沿岸都是乡镇企业，这个化肥企业啊、农药企业很多，污染得很厉害，那些水啊，不可用。 因此呢，他们都赞成呢，搞中线工程或者西线，这2个地方引的水都是很干净的水，很好的水。因此呢，内部争论很激烈。
那个论证的时候呢，这个不同意见到了专家是吧，也形成2种意见是吧，很尖锐是吧，针锋相对是吧。最后呢，到了我们的高层的决策层，是吧？这个。 咱们论证工作呢，进入到僵局了。
The deadlock lasted for several years, but the work of assessing and designing the water diversion project carried on regardless. In October 1992, the 14th CPC National Congress was held in Beijing. It included South to North water diversion on the list of key national projects. In 1994, the designs for the taller Danjiangkou Dam and for the project's trunk routes became progressively more detailed. A series of sideline projects were launched specifically to prevent damage to the middle and lower reaches of the Hanjiang River. Water would be diverted from the Yangtze to replenish the Hanjiang. A water control station would be built at Xinlong, with the existing sluices improved and expanded, and new ones built as part of an effort to improve navigation. Environmental improvement projects were also launched in the developed areas of eastern China. Under new statutes and regulations adopted at the national and provincial level, a number of heavily polluting factories were closed down or obliged to switch to alternative production. In June 1995, the State Council convened a special meeting to discuss the South to North Water Diversion Project. At it, then Premier Li Peng stated, "The South to North Water Diversion Project is a trans-century, key project that will benefit future generations. We must be very careful in studying it and make scientific decisions based on ample assessments." China's policy of reform and opening to the outside world, adopted at the end of the 1970s, brought fast economic growth to the eastern and southern parts of the country. Meanwhile, the situation in the north and south also began to change in a subtle way. For many centuries, the north had needed grain from the south. But now, grain produced in the north was being transported in the opposite direction. The Huanghuai region of northern China became a main grain producer, contributing more than half of the national output. But the region still faced a major problem: the shortage of water. If this problem could not be solved, China's grain security would come under serious threat. The Miyun Reservoir is Beijing's most important water source. By the 1990s, its level was so low that it regularly dipped below the danger level. Beijing is the political, economic and cultural center of China, and its most important and dynamic city. For many years it has faced problems due to the rapid growth of its population. This, in turn, has exacerbated the shortage of water. With surface water no longer able to meet its needs, Beijing had to tap underground water. 2/3 of the water consumed in Beijing now comes from underground, but too much is being extracted, and the water table in the urban area has fallen by nearly 40 meters. This grave situation convinced society of the need for the South to North Water Diversion Project.
北京、天津、这个保定、石家庄、邢台、邯郸、新乡、安阳，整个这一线呢，每个城市下边都是一个大漏斗，地下水超采的大漏斗。城市的这个地下水埋深呢，降到了60米以下，并且这些漏斗呢，逐渐的都形成了一个大深的壕沟，彼此之间的漏斗都连起来，一个一个的漏斗的大坑连起来，形成了一条线。
In June 1999, Jiang Zemin, the then General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, conducted an inspection tour of the Yellow River. He insisted on the necessity of building the South to North Water Diversion Project, saying, "We must work out a practical and feasible plan on the basis of scientific comparison and careful research."
开会也是很紧张的，这个大家都带了庞大的这个工作组啊，这个带着计算机，现场的争论，现场的计算，
对吧？北京、天津，对吧？那边青岛、烟台、济南，对吧？然后京广线沿线的这个河北啊、郑州，对吧？这个河北邯郸，这个每一个城市的这个点上的要用多少水，就是已经深入到这个程度了。
东线、中线的当时一期工程的供水范围以内，当时分析下来结果，现状就缺水大概有51亿立方米左右，一部分就是超采地下水，差不多有36亿立方米，还有一部分挤占农业跟河道内的生态环境用水的，差不多有将近15亿左右。
The Suzhou River has been described as flowing history. it has witnessed Shanghai's growth from a small fishing village to an international metropolis in the course of 100 years. However, in the 1970s, their mother river became a headache for Shanghai's residents when its water became increasingly smelly and dirty. In 1988, the city launched a project to improve the Suzhou River. A wastewater treatment plant was built, sewage water was prevented from flowing into the river, and silt was removed from its bed. Before long, the foul smell and the black colour of the water disappeared. The cleansing of the Suzhou River set a precedent for cleaning other polluted rivers in eastern China. In September 2000, the central authorities established a series of principles for the South to North Water Diversion Project. These were: save water before the water is allocated, treat pollution before the water is supplied, and improve the environment before the water is used. This made it clear that key to the success of the South to North Water Diversion Project was cleaning the polluted bodies of water along its route.
Are awarded to the city of Beijing.
So agrees.
With GDP surpassing $1,000 billion US, China became the sixth largest economy in the world. With its sound economic foundation, its solid national strength, and its advanced technical know-how, China was in a position to launch the gigantic project to divert water from south to north. In November 2002, the CPC convened its 16th National Congress. The meeting issued an explicit call to solve the water shortage affecting some areas and carry out the South to North Water Diversion Project without delay. Thus, the historic project to divert water from south to north reached a key turning point. On December the 23rd, 2002, the State Council approved the general plan for the South to North Water Diversion Project. Construction of the largest water diversion project in history could finally go ahead. According to this plan, the eastern, middle and western routes would divert water from the lower, middle and upper reaches of the Yangtze to North China. The total amount of diverted water would be 44.8 billion cubic meters annually. Of this amount, 14.8 billion cubic meters would be supplied along the eastern route, 13 billion cubic meters along the middle route, and 17 billion cubic meters along the western route. The lengthy feasibility study for the South to North Water Diversion Project involved 24 planning, design and research institutes in the fields of the economy, the environment, agriculture and water conservation. Leading experts attended meetings for more than 6,000 person times and academicians 110 person times. In all, they submitted more than 50 proposals. The general plan for the South to North Water Diversion Project was the result of comprehensive, cross-discipline, cross-government departmental cooperation and cross-regional studies.
原来我们争论的10年，90年代争论10年是东线上、西线是中线上哪个省钱，争论的很多，结果最后2条线一起杀，那是国力到这个水平的。所以这个问题的重大水利工程的决定，都不是一个纯技术问题，都是一个社会、经济、环境一个综合国力的整个的一个表现。
On December the 27th, 2002, following years of discussion and argument, work on the first stage of the eastern and middle routes began.
现在，我宣布南水北调工程开工。
The plan had been drawn up based on careful assessment. It would subsequently undergo regular refinements in the course of the actual construction. The eastern route would be fed with water from the Yangtze, near Yangzhou in Jiangsu province. The water would be lifted by pump stations, step by step, as it flowed northward along the Beijing-Hangzhou Grand Canal. On the way, it would pass through Lake Hongze, Luoma, the South Four Lakes, and East Pinghu Lake. After exiting East Pinghu Lake, a branch would carry it further north across the Yellow River, finally to arrive in Hebei province and Tianjin municipality. Another branch would carry the water eastward to Jinan and further east to Yantai and Weihai. The eastern route would supply water to the four provinces of Jiangsu, Anhui, Shandong, and Hebei, as well as Tianjin municipality. The source of water for the middle route would be the Danjiangkou Reservoir on the middle reaches of the Yangtze. The entire route would be newly dug. It would first run to the Fangcheng mountain pass, where the Yangtze and Huaihe river valleys meet, and from there westward across the Yellow River in Zhengzhou before turning to the north. The middle route would supply water to the provinces of Henan and Hebei and the two municipalities of Beijing and Tianjin. New dams would be built on the Tongtian River, on the upper reaches of the Yangtze, on the Yalang, a tributary of the Yangtze, and on the upper reaches of the Dadu River. A tunnel would be built through the Bayan Ha Mountains. As for the western route, it would replenish the upper reaches of the Yellow River. The three routes extend northward from the Yangtze River Valley to link up the country's four major water systems, namely the Yangtze River, the Huaihe River, the Yellow River, and the Haihe River. With the completion of the entire water diversion project, the three south to north diversion routes will link these four major west to east rivers so that the water resources in the north, south, east, and west can compensate one another through a huge water network. The heightening of the Danjiangkou Dam was completed in April 2010. It was raised from 162 meters to the designed height of 176.6 meters. May the 31st, 2011, Hu Jiantao, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, comes to the reservoir dam. He listens to a briefing on the South to North Water Diversion Project and the benefits brought by the Danjiangkou Reservoir. A few days later, Premier Wen Jiabao also visits the Danjiangkou. The Grand Centennial Project, anticipated for so long by the Chinese people, is nearing completion, step by step. Immediately after New Year's Day 2011, the CPC Central Committee issued a key policy document. For the first time after the founding of New China, the whole country was called on to accelerate the reform and development of water conservation work. Xin Xiyu is a farmer in Mao Laping, a village not far from the Danjiangkou Dam. 10 years ago, she rented 34 hectares of wasteland on a mountain slope. Today, this piece of wasteland is a flourishing orchard. The Hubei provincial government has adopted a series of measures to protect the eco-environment and keep water clean at its source. Farmland has been transformed into forest, trees have been planted, and efforts have been made to prevent desertification and preserve the wetlands. Xin Xiyu was invited to Beijing to attend the National People's Congress. Before she left, she filled a bottle with water from the Danjiangkou Reservoir, which she presented to Premier Li Keqiang.
这个时间呢，中间都赶紧手撑过来，把我手拉到，他都说谢谢水源地的群众，他就把水举起来，他说清清一瓶水，你轻意重，喝了会很心甜的。
Xin Xiyu hopes her special gift can convince the whole country that people living in the reservoir's vicinity will protect it and send clean water to the north. On December the 30th, 2012, the main body of the Yellow River Tunnel on the middle route was completed. In May 2013, the final touches were completed on the Danjiangkou Dam. In June 2013, a test was conducted for conveying water along the first stage section of the south to north water diversion project.
南水北调东线1期主体工程已完工，近日正式通水。中共中央总书记、国家主席、中央军委主席习近平向为工程做出贡献的全体同志表示慰问和祝贺，强调南水北调工程是事关国计民生的战略性基础设施，希望大家再接再厉，确保工程运行平稳、优质高效完成后续工程任务，造福人民群众。
On February the 25th, 2014, General Secretary Xi Jinping inspected the No. 9 waterworks under the Beijing Water Group. He planted a tree and inquired into the water quality. He also issued several key instructions concerning the preservation of water resources, limiting the excessive exploitation of underground water, infrastructure construction, the improvement of the water environment in urban and rural areas, and the security of water supplies. Thanks to careful preparation work and strenuous debates conducted for over half a century, and to the hard work of several generations, the dream of connecting the two great rivers of Chinese civilization, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, and of bringing water to several 100 million people in the north, has finally come true in the 21st century.